Good evening, everybody. Tonight we have the pleasure of hearing from our very own resident, Glenda Slater, who's been here for about 6 months now, and she's going to be talking about the joy of writing. So please help me welcome Glenda.
How many writers do we have here? Raise them high. Be proud. Yeah. What do you write about? I know somebody over here writes memoirs. Yeah, you have to talk loud because you write memoir? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Anybody who writes, how many people write memoir? Cold food and supper. Ooh, lots of people. Is that mostly for your family? Yeah. Yeah. Somebody said no. Did somebody say no? I said no. Who said no? Who? So. Other people must do it too. Yeah. Yeah. And somebody back there. Raise your hand. I've never written memoirs as such, but at one time my husband, who has since passed away, I said something about, well, my writing. I said, you know, I don't do memoir. I don't write about my family. And he said, everything you write is about your family. I got to looking at it and thought, well, there's a good bit. I have written all my life, you know, like all of us, school stuff, work stuff. I've also written fun stuff. How many here have written fun stuff? Yeah, so important. Things like song parodies, skits, poems for occasions, and letters. I didn't always enjoy the writing of the school stuff, but I enjoyed reading it after I wrote it. And I really enjoyed the writing and then the reading of the letters that I wrote to people, which, by the way, how many people here still write letters? Oh, good, good. It's, you know, a letter is a treasure. Now, you know that. And I enjoyed the reading of what I'd written and the performance by myself and by others of the occasional stuff. Something for a birthday, something for an anniversary, something for a special event. That was a lot of fun. There's a woman, Jane Yolen. Have any of you heard of Jane Yolen? She mostly writes for children. She has written over 400 books. She's 2 years younger than I am. She has a book, which I love, and it's called Take Joy. And she says in there, I write that I may read and so contemplate what I have written. You are, after all, the very first reader of what you write. Please that reader. And in the book, she has a little anecdote about staying with a particular writer, and she had gone to bed, and he was in his office working, writing, and she heard him convulsed with laughter over what he had just written. She thought that was great, and I think that's great. And when I'm writing, if it amuses me, I not only love that, but I think, oh, This may amuse someone else too. But the main thing is, does it amuse me? A lot of it does, fortunately. My writing has been a big source of pleasure to me. Now, my output does not approach Jane Yolen's 400 books. But I think she started writing when she was 3. Maybe, I don't know. I do hope my joy equals hers. So I'm going to be talking, as the publicity said, about when I started and how it progressed when I started writing fiction and poetry. And that was after I retired. Up until then, that had been the writing I've talked about, a lot of the occasional stuff. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to be reading as I go along. I want to read what went on at that time. We lived in Kansas for a while. Topeka, Kansas is my favorite place ever. Nobody left, okay? How many like Topeka? 1. I loved Topeka. It broke my heart when we left there. But we moved to Michigan from there. I retired. I had been a speech pathologist and speech communication teacher in colleges. Carl was still working. He had taken a position at Michigan State. And there was a very active wives group. Now, we don't have that anymore much, although I think that group still survives at Michigan State, but it's become more all-encompassing. It's not just a wives group. But there was an active wives group there, and one of the interest groups was a writing group. So I joined them. Someone told me about it and said, come, and I went and joined up. And we were expected to bring writing, something we had written, to every meeting. And there was usually a prompt to write to. And there was a deadline because it was due the next meeting. Those two things, a prompt and a deadline, turned out to be what I needed and have needed ever since. While I was in that group and living there, I started a series of poems. I had been perturbed by the young cashiers in the groceries at the checkout lines. They did not know what these various vegetables were. Have you experienced this? I don't know if it's still that bad, but oh my goodness, I was appalled. So I decided to write some veggie poems aimed at kids. And I wrote about 25 in this series while we were there in Michigan. I took some of them to many elementary schools and had the kids interacting with me and the poetry and the veggies. Took the veggies with me. They loved them, and their teachers loved them. Well, that was a joy and a pleasure, and I went to so many. And I'm going to read to you 2 of those poems, those veggie poems. The first one is the Humpty Dumpty eggplant. Picture your eggplant here, which I had already cut, so it was together, but I could open it up. The Humpty Dumpty eggplant is a mystery to me, because if you cut it open, there is no yolk to see. And if you look, you'll notice that it doesn't have a shell, and it's not white. It's purple. And it's much too big as well. I wouldn't call it eggplant. It needs a name that's new, a funny name. It fits it. But I can't think of one. Can you? Well, the kids really interacted with this. And I think that eggplant poem is my favorite of what I call goobers and tubers and pickles and peas. And this is another poem from that series. Oh, those onions. There are tulip bulbs for planting. There are screw-in bulbs for light. And Rudolph has a bulbous nose. Now that's a funny sight. But there's a bulb that you can eat. An onion's what I mean. We put it in our recipes for soups and stews and greens. My grandma loves this tasty bulb. I guess that must be why. When she must cut an onion up, it always makes her. The kids love that one. Okay. Well, when Carl retired from Michigan State, we moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, and I found a small writing group, very small, a little too small, but fun and helpful. The critique was very helpful, and that's when I started learning to appreciate critique. Hey, things could be made better. Duh. I had always written fast and easily, and I thought, okay, I don't want to do anything over. I found I liked critique, and I liked revision. So that was a big story right there. I continued to write children's poetry, and I continued to take those veggie poems to elementary schools. So the interest and activity continued, and there was still a monthly deadline. But what did I miss? The prompts. There weren't prompts. And in Wilmington, we had great friends and loved Wilmington. But we had no family roots, and that really angry ocean just didn't do it for someone like me who had grown up near the Gulf, 10 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. So we moved to Fairhope, Alabama. How many know about Fairhope? One? That's good, because they don't need any more people coming into Fairhope. It's got enough. It's a beautiful little town between Mobile and Gulf Shores. And it has a whole lot of writers. I joined a very large, open to everyone in a two-county area group for writers. They had programs every month and a contest every month, both prose and poetry. And it provided just what I needed, a prompt and a deadline. And I had never written short stories, but it turned out that flash fiction was my thing at that point. How many do flash fiction, have done flash fiction, know what flash fiction is? Flash fiction is very short. And in this particular, it varies from, group to whatever. But in this particular group, it was 500 words or less. Now that is an exercise. And I found I was good at that. I could actually write a story in that many words. I won the contest a lot, boosting my confidence, enormously. I brought one of my stories from that. The prompt was a line from a famous song. I'm not going to tell you what the famous song is. You can figure it out, I'm sure. The name of the story, The Fundamental Things. He comes slouching in at 3 o'clock in the morning with the same old story. I erupt, yell things I've been bottling up for weeks. He does his hang-dog thing, shakes his head, stubs out his cigarette, says he's sorry, but that I know they're past deadline and over budget. You know how much I love you, baby, he says. You know you can absolutely rely on that. Then he asks if a kiss would help. Comes over, puts his arms around me, whiskey on his breath, as usual. I jerk away. A kiss is just a kiss, I said. He sighs a big, dramatic sigh, head hanging down again. And I say, a sigh doesn't amount to a hill of beans. But I adore you, baby, and my kisses and sighs, all the fundamental things, still mean what they meant when we started wooing. You must remember that, how it was then, he says. I still feel the same no matter how much I have to come in late. The moonlight, the love songs, the passion, they're still here. They don't go out of date no matter how much time goes by. I give out a pretty exasperated sigh. You think I don't know what you're doing and who you're doing it with all these nights. I'm catching a plane out of here tomorrow. I've already printed out my boarding pass. I pick it up and wave it at me. Baby, you can't do that. He takes my arms and holds tight. Look at me. Listen to me. You've got to get over this jealousy of the women I work with. Women? No, woman. Just one woman. But jealousy? No. I may hate her and her stupid Swedish accent, but I'm not jealous, not anymore. She can have you. I try to pull away, but he won't let go. Baby, you can't leave me. A woman needs her man, and you're my mate, and I'm not letting you go. I'll fight for you. I'm keeping you. I'll do it or die. Glory be, what a drama king. But I can't deny what he's saying. I'm weakening, and he knows it. He pulls me close and kisses me. I drop the boarding pass on the piano and kiss back. He smiles. I drown in those sexy, bloodshot eyes. Here's looking at you, baby, he says. Oh, bogey, I say. That was fun to write. Okay. Where am I? That's 3, that's 4. So, still in Fairhope. Yes, still in Fairhope. And I wrote to a prompt, a poem. The prompt was A Midsummer Night's Dream. I wrote the poem, A Midsummer Night's Scream. I was still in that big writers group, which gave me the prompt. And, but I also had been invited to join an exclusive group, smaller, and at the end of one of our sessions, I brought out that poem I had written, A Midsummer Night's Scream, and read it. When I finished reading it, one of the members came over and said if I'd write more Shakespeare poems, she would publish the resulting book. It's good to be in a writing group with someone who has a small press that specializes in poetry, and that this woman is someone I had known as a child in Foley, Alabama. That all worked out well. So I wrote 19 more poems, and Sue published the book, Fooling Around with Shakespeare. This is the softback. I have a hardback version. She published the hardback version. So I'm going to read one of the poems from that. Bubble, bubble. This is Fooling Around with Macbeth. It was a murky day. I went upon my way to gather mushrooms in the wood. I'd heard that they were devilish good. The wood was dark and deep. I heard small creatures creep along the side of the path I took, beneath the leaves that trees had shook. I did not fear the sound, but still I looked around, wondering how far I should wander. It was looking blacker yonder. 'Twas then I heard a shrill, strange voice from o'er Small Hill, a cackling, disagreeable, and shout, "It's now foreseeable!" After came long mutter, making me to shudder. It spoke of murder, bloody, foul, and ended, "Throw in, beak of owl." And lo, I saw bent three who looked like hags to me. A cauldron steamed o'er flames blazed high. They stirred in creature leg, claw, eye. My blood, it boiled with fear. I thought that death was near. But when I turned to run away, one hag ran after, shrieking, "Stay!" My feet stopped on the spot. They would obey me not. I turned and looked on wizened face and asked, "What's happening in this place?" My voice did quiver, quake. My bones did shiver, shake. The three crones cackled at my fear. One said, "We knew that you'd come here." I pictured in the stew parts of me, quite a few. But still, I could not leave the place. They held me in vise-like embrace. "Your name's Macbeth, I think," said one. Her breath did stink. "You thinketh wrong, you fearsome hag. My name is Lester, Lester Flagg. I think Macbeth is dead. At least that's what I read. Some fellow named Macduff, it said, chopped off your poor old Mackie's head." "Oh, drat darn heck," they cried. "Our cauldron's gone cockeyed. It's been predicting toil and trouble. Shoot, it's just been bubble, bubble. If you're not fame we seek, then prophecy we can't speak. The stupid kettle flubbed today. We won't be starring in a play." I turned to go, relieved. One hag caught at my sleeve. "Oh, bide-a-wee," she said to me, "our fine concoction you must see." I liked it not that she was close examining me. Especially, she eyed my eyes. Somehow, that came as no surprise. I snatched my arm away. said thanks, but I can't stay, and set out at a panicked pace that took me swiftly from that place. And now, whene'er I dine, mushrooms I decline. Lots of fun writing those poems. Lots of fun. So, anyway, still in Fairhope, still with the big large group. A couple of years later, there was a prompt there in the group that went something like autumn in the land of deciduous trees. I decided to write a story personifying autumn. I wrote the story, but when I got to what should have been the end, I realized it was actually a chapter. It wasn't a short story. It was a chapter for a book. More inspiration came to me from something called Inspiration Oak. That was a tree whose owner, this was real and true, in Fairhope, the owner had it killed when the government took possession of it to make a park around it. Heartbreaking all the way around. And now I have to say, what you see when you pass that place, the tree died. It was girdled. She hired people to girdle it. It died. It stayed there stark for some years, and then they took it away. And what was supposed to be the park is about the size of this room with chain link fence around it. Heartbreaking. All the way around. That really touched me. And that gave me some inspiration for this book. I had autumn, the personified autumn, and I had the tree, and wrote this middle grade novel for ages around 8 to 13. I can't say it wrote itself, but everything presented itself. And it was a great joy to write this book. I loved it. I loved my characters, and they kept showing me what needed to be done, like you read about, you know, and well, it really happened. And so I'm going to read an excerpt from what is Pickle Pod Hero. This is chapter 19, The Battle at the Tree. I should set this up a little. There's Billy, who lives with his grandpap, who has a little dog named Punchy, and his best friend is Rick. There are two villains who drive a pickup truck. And remember, this is set in why would you remember? This is set in 1939. Punchy hears the truck. This is called the battle at the tree. Punchy hears the truck while it's still a mile away. He's been listening to Rick snoring. He hasn't heard any sounds from the tree since Billy climbed up there. The truck is coming fast. Punchy runs out to Rick and nudges his arm. Rick stops snoring, shrugs his arm away, and turns over onto his other side. Punchy nudges harder and barks. Rick's eyes open. Punchy, what? Then he hears the faint sound of the truck. Oh man, here they come, here they come. He turns on his flashlight, points it to the ground, and runs over to the tree. Hey, Billy, I hear you, Rick, not so loud. Get on back to your spot and get ready. Turn that light off. Punchy, you get back into the bushes. Rick, take him over there and tell him to stay and to be quiet. Say it like you mean it. Punchy whines, but he goes with Rick and lies down until Rick leaves. Then he's up and facing toward the noise of the truck. He stays, though, and he keeps quiet. Rick's bushes are a good ways in back of the tree. His heart is pounding. It's not just from excitement now. He's scared. What he most wants is to take off running for Lost Lane, but he can't leave Billy up in the tree with that pickup coming. Billy is scared too, but he's not thinking about running. The whistle chain is around his neck. The pot lids are in Grandmam's hidey hole. He has used the rough end of a broken branch to poke a hole through the top of the sack of prickle pods, and it's hanging there on the branch. He's thinking he may throw up. Billy has to find a way to save that tree, and it turns out that Punchy gets dog-napped by the two bad guys. So Billy also has to figure out something about that. I just thought I would tell you about a few things, and maybe you have some comments of what you've experienced, or questions, or whatever. But just thinking about getting into the publishing business, that's difficult, and marketing is. So anyway, just some things that I found in writing these things. Pickle Pod Hero, one of the things about that is the name. Now, what would you think a Pickle Pod Tree would be? There is apparently a pickle pod tree. So I don't know. But anyway, my Pickle Pod Tree is a magnolia. And it's the biggest magnolia in the state. And just recently, they have, wait a minute, I said 39. This is set in 49, isn't it? Yeah, the book is set in 49. So anyway, I was crazy about magnolia trees growing up. And my tree, spotlighted on, is a magnolia tree, and the pods, the seed pods, are the prickle pods. But people have trouble with the name, and so it gets called Pickle Pod Tree. Pickle Pod Hero a lot. I find that frustrating, irritating, but actually very funny. So maybe I'm taking joy with that. The Fooling Around with Shakespeare hardcover. When I got my first copies, now this was a regular publisher, not a for-hire publisher. I got my first copies, I opened one up to the preface and found it had become a book of poems. That bothered me a lot. The Fooling Around with Shakespeare softcover, which I had done somewhere else, particularly because I wanted a different cover. I had not been consulted on the cover of the first one. But I got my first copies, and the spine was blank. And I inquired about this, and they said, oh, I needed 4 more pages before they could put lettering on the spine. Could they not have told me this ahead of time? Great thing about Fooling Around with Shakespeare, I'm a member of PEO Sisterhood, and a PEO sister did the illustrations. And that was just great fun working with her. Pickle Pod Hero, I had trouble finding the right cover illustrator. Everyone said, yeah, you need an illustrator. You don't just need a book designer. I had a book designer, book cover designer, but I needed an illustrator. And I made contact with an artist who had lived across the street from us. years and years ago in Memphis. And Keith is here, one son. My other son, Derek, his best friend, when they were children, we lived across the street from them, and his best friend, David, was a wonderful artist even back then. And I got in contact with David after all those many years, and he did the illustration, and what a joy and pleasure and delight. I have to tell you, I went to a conference. I hadn't been to conferences lately, but my Pickle Pod Hero, the first 3 chapters won a couple of big awards, and one of the awards included going to the conference, the state conference of the SCBWI, which is the big thing for children's writers and illustrators. The region, I won in the region, they gave me free tuition. It was in Atlanta, and I walked into this big library where all the sessions were. Now this was just a few years ago. I looked around at all these younger women there with their various smart things that they were typing on. I pulled out my yellow pad from my tote bag and went to the session that I was most interested in and took quite a lot of notes, much more than I usually take, and readable. I mean, it's good. Later, I went to another session, reached into my tote bag, no yellow pad. It was gone. This whole conference was in a library, nowhere else. I went to every place I had been. There were only about 3 or 4 rooms. Now, who stole my yellow pad? Right? I'm sure it was perhaps considered a relic that would be valuable. So anyway, it was gone. And that has become, every time I think about that, I find that very funny. Well, anyway, writing has been for me a lot of fun and a lot of, oh, I forgot to talk about money, because I have the joy of these automatic deposits into an account that I have for my book money. And so checks come in most months, and I get notified, $18, $16, $12. The one this month, 27 cents. Anyway, it's been fun, it's therapeutic, it's healthy, and it's a challenge. I enjoy it as I write, and I still enjoy reading what I've written, and I think Jane Yolen would approve. Now, I would love to hear your experiences, or if you have any deep questions at this point.
Have you self-published anything?
I self-published the Pickle Pod Tree, Pickle Pod Hero, and it had won that big SCPW, whatever, award, and the final judge had been a New York agent, and so I contacted him and asked him if he would read the rest, the whole thing, and consider representing me. And he said he would read the whole thing, which he did, said he did, but he declined to represent me. But Pickle Pod Hero even for that age, it's not edgy. The current thing is edginess. They want. Now, Pap has a drinking problem, and Billy has some difficulties with these people, but it's not the kind of edginess that you see on the shelves. On the other hand, people like the book. Many, many people have read the book and like the book. But anyway, I thought if I went, my publisher for the first book specialized in poetry books. So she was not a possibility to, and when I was thinking about, well, I'd have to get an agent at this point, got to have an agent, and Keith said to me, I thought it was really good advice, this was just a few years ago, of course, it was published in 21, it was published last October, but he said to me at that time, when I was talking about, oh, maybe I should look for an agent, and he said, well, you're going to spend a lot of time finding an agent because they don't just roll off the trees. And then if you find one, he or she is going to spend a lot of time finding a publication house, a press that's interested. And if this person is found, this press is found, then you're going to be given an editor who's going to want all these changes. And I thought, this is true. It's so true. And how many years did I want to or have to devote to this? So I went to a friend who owned a self-publishing press and did that. And of course, that was easy to get into and do, but it was fraught with difficulties. I found I really had to, he didn't sweat the small stuff, is the truth of the matter. He was good in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, not so good. So I can't say I'm too crazy about any kind of publishing. Have others had, I know you've had somebody over here had what was it, Houghton Mifflin? What was the press who published your scholarly book? No? Have I got that wrong?
Yeah, it was Harper and Row.
Harper Row. Well, Harper Row, that's good. But, yeah.
What about magazine outlets?
Magazine.
Yeah, where they'll compensate you for a good piece of fiction.
The truth is, I'm not a marketer. And I do, my other son is working on that with his wife. They are into marketing. They work on it some, but they have other things to do. And I guess at this point, it pleases me if something sells, and it pleases me a lot if somebody says they like it, but it's not that important to me. It is more important to me to enjoy the writing, and I find it therapeutic. And yeah, I find at this point, although I still give lip service and some action to marketing, not much. What's your favorite books from childhood? Anne of Green Gables, yes. And that series that they did years ago with Megan Follows. That was so good. Is that it for favorite? How about favorite adult? Any tricks lately.
I got my doctor's degree in 1963 at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. And then for 4 years I taught bright women on a beautiful campus. This is Wellesley, outside of Boston. The quickest way to get dismissed at Wellesley was to be a poor, disinterested teacher. So I put most of my effort into teaching. And I had to leave after 4 years because only half the department could be tenured. And there were 4 full professors they weren't about to leave. So I came here. At the University of Iowa, it was a pretty good idea to teach well. It was more important to publish. And I remember chairman along the way. I was then around 50, 55 maybe. When he evaluated us for salary increases, the dean had to approve whether it was teaching, service, and research. And he said, we're all good teachers. It doesn't count. What counts is publishing and service, especially publishing.
Yeah.
And he wrote me a note once. He says, I can finally give you a good raise if you get some stuff published. I found at that point that if you got invited to write an article for a Fest a group of essays honoring somebody, that'd be an article. And then somebody else might read that article and ask you to do one for somebody else. Or the first article I wrote was on what are called wisdom psalms in the Hebrew Psalter. And then the next article I developed from that as one of the themes in wisdom psalms is retribution. You know, you do well, great. You do badly, good luck. Yeah. It's not cool. But I found that an idea in the first article sort of was like a seed for the second article. That doesn't go all the way,
Yeah.
but it does on occasion.
Anybody else experienced that? No. Anything else anybody wants to say? Thank you for coming.